Well, welcome everybody. We would like to get to know a little bit more about who is in the room. So if you're in a spot where you feel comfortable to take yourself off video, we would appreciate it. We all know what it's like hello, Lindsay, when you're speaking to just the computer these days. And so we would love to see some faces as we go through this process. Hi, Brian. Hi, Lori. How was the keynote? Anybody have a chance to watch? Hi, Lenice.
She was excellent.
Awesome. Very good. All right. Well, we would like to welcome you. There are two of us here that are going to help facilitate this particular session. And I'll turn it over to Miss Hillary Baker, who will introduce herself, and then I'll do the same.
Yes, good afternoon. It's almost evening, though. I probably should say evening. It's so good to see all of you today. Just a little bit of background. I'm going to be helping to facilitate and monitoring the chat today and just kind of chiming in. Couple of things. I'm currently the Director of Instructional Services in Allegan Public Schools, but was a social studies teacher for 22 years. And currently, really trying at this point to doing a lot of work in elementary and trying to figure out how we can support more civic education and social studies instruction to pair it with our reading instruction right now. But it's so good to see everybody, today, just we're going to really try to kind of see what the needs are here for the group and kind of structure your needs. There's Michelle Becker. Hi, Michelle. So another role I play is I'm actually on the board for the Michigan Center for Civic Education too. So I'm wearing a lot of hats today to help facilitate with Ellen.
And hi, everybody. My name is Ellen Swernstein. When we signed on to the link, we might look a lot alike, but if you see that there's an image next to my name in the participant list, just know that that's Dave Johnson, who also might be in this space, but actually with a different login. So just to prevent any additional confusion on that, I'm Ellen Swernstein. The picture of me in the participant list is Dave Johnson. I currently direct the Michigan Center for Civic Education, and we are really the only statewide K through 12 or PK through 12 nonprofit or any kind of organization that exists to advocate for intentional inclusion of civics and civic education. And it is increasingly our belief that when you have a civic education, a civic identity formation, then everything else falls into place and everything else becomes a lot easier because there is a much greater feeling of inclusion, belonging, and democratic possibilities in schools. So we warmly welcome you to this session. And we do have a presentation we can share with you. And the first thing that we're going to ask of you is, when you get a moment, and I feel much better that in a room of educators, we all know how technology is. And so thank you for your infinite grace ahead of getting started, knowing that some of these we're gonna work through as we go. So we would like to learn more about you. And in the chat, there'll be a link momentarily for you to sign up and tell us more about yourselves. Nope, that is a Zoom link. I'll get that to you in just a moment. So if you could, because we have several people in this space, Hillary, maybe you can monitor the participant list while I get that link working and kind of get everybody to say their name, get your name in this space, and a hope or a need that you have for our time together. And I'll get that link working. So Hillary, do you want to call on somebody, get us started?
Yeah, so a hope or a need. I'm going to pick on Michelle. A hope or a need for tonight.
Hi, Ellen and Hillary. It's great to see you. I guess a hope I have for tonight is maybe some takeaways to be able to elevate the critical nature of needing to focus on economics in elementary. I think that's what I would hope to take away for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Lindsay?
Hi, so I am hoping to learn more about how to teach economics and civics in a more engaging way for my students. I know like there's a lot of vocabulary needs around this content. So just making it more engaging for my students and a little more meaningful for them.
Thank you, Lindsay. Merritt.
Can I talk to you?
Hi, yeah, my name is Merritt, and I guess I'm just listening for and hoping to learn just some of the current thinking behind civics education and elementary learning.
Okay, and a couple more. Kathy, Miss Savoy.
Oh, you got the last name right. Good for you. I'm listening to everybody and agreeing. I would like to walk away with some great ideas on how to teach civics in an engaging way to my students. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to it.
So I'm hearing a common thread of engagement, how we can really maybe make our civics education. And I also heard a couple of references to economics in elementary and how we can really make that relevant for our earliest learners. I'm going to pick on a couple more here. Marilyn. I don't know if Marilyn's with us. All right, Tom, I'm going to pick on you.
Oh, I was just typing in chat. Thanks. I'm Tom Hinken. I'm a social studies consultant in Muskegon. I am hoping to find a way to make it meaningful and engaging for kids, kind of like unlock like the civic potential in our elementary students.
Ooh, I love that. Unlock the civic potential. Okay. Kathy or Caitlin, sorry, just shared. She's a 4th and 5th grade teacher. She's hoping to learn, again, how to make social studies more engaging for her upper L students. And Marilyn, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I'm really here just to see if we have any best practices in civics, how best to teach it to 3rd graders.
Perfect. Okay. And then hoping to find out how I can better support my teachers through resource purchasing and curation. So some time maybe to think about possible instructional materials, which we can definitely talk about and maybe introduce today. Also, we have Lori from kindergarten. She wants to see how to bring it down to her students' level. So I think those are all, again, I'm seeing the engagement piece as being an important part. So Ellen, I think we have something to work with.
Absolutely. And so what we'll do right now is that take about 30 seconds and find something near you that is symbolic of a hope or a need that you have for this particular session. So 30 seconds, find something in arm's length or near arm's length that represents something that deals with civic education and what you're hoping to accomplish tonight. About 15 more seconds. please take 5 more seconds. All right, and the count down from 3, this will be the STEM portion of the evening. 3, 2, 1. What is your object? Make sure we can see it. Hold it up, hold it up, hold it up. Ooh, all right. All right, Mr. Chuck, you have been chosen to explain your particular object and why that is potentially a symbol of the time that we'll have here together.
Okay, I chose a candlestick. In my study, I'm all about history and everything in here. I've got an 1812 musket and all kinds of jazz. But when I look at the candlesticks and I think about the number of people that drafted things like our Constitution by candlelight, and that in darkness you can't really see things. It's hard to read. And we can bring some real illumination to our students by teaching them simple things. And when I think about kindergarten, myself and others, I think about, gee, how can I think about others than just besides me? And how do I fit in with helping meet the needs of others? So we, as we do that, we're helping them understand the common good. I think that civic engagement illuminates the students. So that's why I picked the candlestick and the candle.
Well, thank you. We want to acknowledge the 2 levels of what that candle might represent, and also know resources that you have in us here at MCCE. We know that teachers and administrators, everyone in the world right now, is burning the candle at both ends. And so we want to be able to be here to help support you in your learning as you go through, or coach or have different conversations about how to plan different resources. And the other brilliant thing about the candle is that from one candle, you can illuminate so much. And if you can get the spark from one candle and light all the other candles, now you have much more illumination. So you never lose fire by sharing that spark with other people. It only makes the world even brighter. So well done, well done. That's a great way to think about it. So what we'll do here is we're ready to kind of pivot based on what we are kind of assessing as the overall need of the group. So we could go in several different directions, and based on what we've heard so far, Hillary and I are going to speak briefly while and we have an idea, but we would like to kind of hear where you might be at in terms of your own thought processes around civics, especially civics in the elementary school. So up on this slide, there are 3 different quotes. They may or may not inspire you or resonate, but if there is one that resonates, please take a moment and reflect why it resonates and why it might be relevant to a discussion about civics in particular in elementary schools. Is it large enough? Can you see that on the screen? Okay. Miss Jackson, hopefully sometime you'll get to go home soon. We're with you though, we understand.
Thanks.
And as you reflect, again, choose one and perhaps put why you're thinking about it, if it does resonate with you, in the chat. And when we work with teachers, and I come from a teaching background as well, by far what we experience, and particularly in elementary schools, is that our schools have become a place where, especially elementary, where we talk about all the values. We talk about the importance of working together. We talk about the importance of empathy, but our programs and our curriculum doesn't always match it. And it's typically up to the individual teacher personality to make sure it's embedded in a particular classroom. So a couple of the things that we particularly like to focus on are classroom practices and protocols that absorb and enhance any and all styles of conversation. And a lot of what we do is anchored in cognitive coaching and adaptive schools type protocols. So you're going to see us use that in just a moment. We also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of fear in schools right now. There is a lot of fear about what an administrator might say about approaching certain topics in a classroom. There's a lot of fear about parents and guardians and the grown folks as a backlash against what may be happening in the classroom. And that we live in a time where our language and our news sources amplify differences rather than letting us come together and sharing particular values. And so we appreciate each one of you being here tonight so that we can tackle those things head on. And we'll talk to some very specific curricular materials based on the interest here that will help bridge a civic identity in school. And there's a couple ones that we really think are important. So a little bit about MCCE is that we're an independent nonprofit in Michigan, and we get to curate many of the resources from other national organizations. So whether it's National Constitution Society, the Center for Civic Education, Civics, we're often a part of those conversations about the type of materials that are being presented. So based on what we're seeing here is that we'll probably spend most of our time talking about very specific program pieces. None of that, we don't make any money on selling anything. That's not our job. Our job is simply to make sure that we are doing best practices and making sure you have access to those. And then we also provide the teacher support, administrator support, and we host many student programs to bring these events to life.
So I just want to highlight some of the quotes that are resonating with the participants right now. But that idea, the difficulty right now of having those conversations is being lifted out. And really, how to try to acknowledge each other's different perspectives, especially right now, and value our differences. But yeah, someone said people are uncomfortable with too many conversations, and often I see they aren't sure how to overcome being uncomfortable, right? So it's kind of, and especially as we talk through some of these issues in our elementary classrooms, providing some language and some of those best practices pieces, and knowing that engagement is going to be something that this group really wants to start to address too.
And so perhaps the next question that will help guide our response to your needs is the question of how do you know if a student is engaged? What might be some of the indicators that you hold internally that are markers of engagement? Feel free to shout out a few of them. Everybody else, please do put some in the chat. But what might engagement look like?
Kids talking to each other.
About
the subject, or about even just, whatever is being taught, but even just sharing their own stories.
So you're identifying a safety to be authentic in a student's experience.
Yes.
We have a couple coming out. Colton shared students being able to apply what they learn outside of school. Students are talking more than the teacher, right? The person who's doing the most talking is doing the most learning in the classroom. Excitement. and that they can share kids digging into those topics, developing solutions, looking at change, students questioning, right? So sometimes that accountable talk really are the kids asking, the real high level questions. Continuing, okay, here's a great one, continuing learning on their own time about a topic. So the idea of inquiry is lifting out from this group in terms of that engagement. Student discourse, questioning again.
So you're all identifying some dispositions that involve curiosity, that involve an innate desire to learn more. And there is some public literacy going on in the discussion too, because you want students to feel free to have meaningful exchanges in their conversations that advance the topic and or advance understanding of each other. So a takeaway question, and this one does not need to be answered right now, is a question of, do you feel this as a staff, that you have the permission to be engaged in civic learning and civic knowledge? Because that's a whole nother component about making sure that we as the educators are also authentic and modeling that curiosity and learning side by side our students. So much more of a takeaway question, but how is it that you also might decide to grow in this area with your colleagues and your staff? So what we want to talk about, and what it seems resonates for most, is that the more you can use language in a meaningful way, starting pre-K, definitely starting in kindergarten, the more likelihood a student or a person's going to feel like they're a part of the community. There's been a lot of new research lately around civic identity and civic formation. And what that means is that our students need to see teachers, administrators engage in these same conversations, because that then validates their own point of curiosity and their own desire to explore more. And so when we think about civic identity, obviously we want to see engagement in our students, knowledgeable engagement from our students. We also need to ask ourselves, what are we doing? And that's why we're here to help with that particular part. We're happy to be on that journey with you. And as we begin, and you're all demonstrating this so far in brilliant ways, as mentioned, we're really rooted in very specific norms of collaboration. And I will say this, a part of my background had been coaching policy debate for over 20 years. And it, from classroom practices, after school practices, weekend invitational, and teams that were ranked very competitively on the national level. It was not until embracing these norms that the students really started to excel, mostly because it made me as educator back up and to rethink, is my communication method matching the intent of what the outcome I'm looking for? And so embracing these norms, starting pre-K and kindergarten, there's some beautiful pictures and videos of kindergarteners embracing some of these norms, that we can actually start to develop the empathy, the curiosity, and the authentic engagement that we're all hoping for. So for those of you, and some of you are familiar with adaptive schools, this is very similar. We've adapted it and adopted one additional norm. But go ahead and take a look, take about 30 seconds or so. And what is it here that you need to be mindful of for the next half hour that we have together? And go ahead and put that in the chat. Yes, Amanda, being part of the picture. And Ms. Jackson writes that students have to be able to relate. And oftentimes that is absolutely a question of representation in stories and the narratives that we're telling. And a real civics, real history, not glossing over it. And one of the pieces that we're particularly focusing on, feel free to put anything in the chat for yourself as a reminder of what you want to practice tonight, that all of these classroom practices, all of these different curricular pieces that we'll be putting together require practice. And the danger of trying to be perfect means that we never get out of the way of our students' way so they can really emerge. And so that's one of the models that keeps us going, is that practice makes progress. So Hillary, I think what makes the most sense is for us to.
We can dig into
The programs.
Because that's going to hit their engagement pieces as well as provide some resources, but also because they're embedded in the practices.
Absolutely. So as we look here, you're going to notice a couple pieces that we're really being intentional about language. And we say this not because it's a key takeaway, but one, we want you to hold us accountable for our language. And we want everyone to reflect on the type of language that they use in their classroom, because the more you're practicing the different language choices, the more comfortable conflict becomes. And the more it's easier to understand difference and still value the humanity in one another. So just 3 quick big picture ideas. The first one that we want to speak about is differentiating between the political and the partisan. Have a great anniversary, Lisa. Okay, so the political versus the partisan. As teachers, as administrators, it is important for us to differentiate these two, because everything that we do in our schools is a political act. We are intentionally in public or private schools because they cultivate a particular shared meaning and shared identity. So when we talk about things being politicized in a negative way, we really want to be intentional about reclaiming that word, because everything that we do in education is a political act. We're trying to work on how do we live together. That's a shared value that we embrace together. What we don't try to do is to think about the partisan as much, outside of teaching that there are political parties. We heed off the partisan, and by far, this distinction will help de-escalate any potential issue, because you can say, you're right, what we're doing is political because we're establishing values. But what we're not doing is picking winners and losers in a partisan race. Another piece in terms of language is that we're trying to reorient our language around sides. So often, and we hear this in the media all the time, and we accidentally recreate this ourselves, is we might say, what's the other side to the story? Or what both parties or both sides are a problem, or both sides have, whatever. If we can step away from that language and instead embrace multiple perspectives, we're going to get to what Ms. Jackson is talking about and what Brian is talking about. And being able to say, you know what? There are multiple perspectives to this story. There are never, ever 2 sides to a story. There are always multiple perspectives. And that's how you start to honor and raise to the level of consciousness different civic identities. And then they all have value in society, because it's not an artificial distinction for winning and losing. It's about perspective taking. And the last piece to talk about briefly is that it is important for us as teachers, especially in elementary school, where there's so much focus on being nice and to each other, that we start to think through that there's different types of ways that we can disagree. And one of them is healthy in terms of coming up with some really good ideas. Affective conflict is not great. That's when you just don't like somebody because of something. But cognitive conflict really results in robust thinking around community and around policy issues. And so we share this so that you can hold us accountable to this language and also start to think about how might shifting some of this language be of value in your quest to include greater civic identity in your schools. So Hillary, let's start with talking about, so we were prepared to go in about 5 different directions. But based on what you've said, we want to talk more about some of the programs that MCCE helps to support. Not to say that there aren't variations on the theme, but these are programs that have a strong curricular base in elementary and might be very meaningful for your students and will become evident because it creates the engagement in ways that you all described that you would like in the chat.
Yeah. And before I kind of get started though, I want to just poll real quickly. The new standards, Michigan standards regarding social studies and civic education K-5. Could you just put in the chat on a scale of 0 to 5? 5 being, oh my gosh, I can name them. I know what they are. They're fully embedded in my school or my classroom or my district, down to 0 going, wait a minute, they changed the standards. So if you could just put it on a scale 0 to 5, just kind of your understanding of the revised standards in social studies at the elementary level. Okay, 4, 2, 1, 3, 2.
What was one was what?
Not very well. Not a lot of knowledge. Yep. So it looks like as a group, we're ranging anywhere from a 1 to a 4. Someone says, "Yep, I know they changed, but I haven't seen them." So we're finding across the state that there's just a different level of comfort with some of those revised standards. And what Ellen has just put on the screen, right? So as we think about, especially at the elementary level, I know in my current district, especially at elementary, right, there's such a focus on reading and literacy and math and the reading essentials, right? The literacy essentials. And so we're trying to figure out how can we really get to those literacy essentials when we're teaching social studies, when we're teaching science, and how we might be able to do this. But the slide that Ellen is just putting up is, I think, may help to frame a little bit how we might rethink how can we embed more kind of that civic literacy in the things that we're already doing. But if you look at the skills and processes, K2, you're going to notice there's reading and communication, there's inquiry, research, analysis, public discourse, decision-making, civic participation. So a lot of these skills you're going to find that are embedded in the new standards, not just with the skills, but also in some of the content. K5 here, the whole arc of inquiry, right? So it's modeled after the C3 framework, the new standards are, but this may help because if you're thinking about how to leverage and how, you know, in the short time, it feels like you have time to teach social studies, maybe within your classrooms or your schools. This may be an entry point to kind of think about how can we embed those literacy essentials in our social studies and vice versa. But we're going to kind of just maybe that engagement piece, because that kind of spoke so clearly through the group who's joining us today. Some of the resources that may help, and the resources that we're going to share today are resources that really are free, that may help that piece. So if you could go to Ellen, the next slide, that might be good. So especially at the elementary middle school level, there's a wonderful program called Project Citizen Project Community. And it really is a program that gets our kids engaged in some meaningful action within their own classrooms. It could be within their own schools. It could be within their own communities. And it is very hands-on. a lot of collaboration. And I'm gonna, Ellen, if you can speak a little bit maybe more towards that Project Citizen piece in terms of at the elementary level, specifically what that might look like and how that might work in our classrooms.
So this by far is the best way to re-anchor a school identity in civic identity. And it's also a way that if there's a Project Citizen base in your school, and it can be scaffolded at different levels, then that is also how you integrate the math and the science in a really authentic way, because all of that has to be addressed in order to make a proposal for change. And so Project Citizen is really one of the best, and I've started to rephrase this a little bit, problem-based learning for positive civic identity results. And so if you could, in the chat, think about one or two things that is on your mind or on your, you think might be on your students' mind. And go ahead and put an issue or a problem that you identify or you think your students would identify. And go ahead and throw that in the chat. And then we'll pick a couple of these to actually model throughout this session. So as you do that, Project Citizen is really an opportunity at all age levels for students to address issues in their community. And there are some really, really good programs out there that have their own take on this. What is important about the approach behind Project Citizen, that it is anchored in understanding government and understanding public policy in ways that many others are not. And so that's where you start to get the rigor, the additional questions, the curiosities of how different cities or different communities approach different pieces, and really becomes a whole integrated civics curriculum at all age levels. So we might see here, and we have had students take on various issues. So we've had K-12 students address everything from school safety, and that's something that can occur in the elementary levels. They can address the water issues. So schools will say, hey, we really want some working water fountains that are healthy for us to drink in our schools, or air quality. Middle school classroom rewrote their school's sexual harassment program for their student handbook. So real and global warming and different environmental issues come up all the time, where students say, I want to make the earth a little bit better. And then that can be the overarching goal at any grade level. And how people choose, or how the students would choose to attack this as a public policy issue and problem, is really where you get the differentiate at the different grade levels. Parks, we have a great mentor teacher who does Project Citizen with us in elementary school. And because they did Project Citizen, they started to have new pathways in their parks that were lit and safe, for that students could get to school better, and that there were more running paths in their communities. And so all of those different issues come up. And there was a question about the age range. And I'll show you, and if you signed up, we'll make sure that link is back up there. We would be happy to share with you the different resources, although I've also just kind of put them up on Google Docs when they're relevant too, so that you can recreate these in your own classrooms. There is currently 2 levels of book that outlines this curriculum. The first one is elementary/middle school. It's written in a way that really anybody could have access to, including 2nd and 3rd graders. We've seen a lot of success with that, as well as a different level, which is more middle school, high school. That's also one reason why I kind of have adapted and adopted all the different resources and Google links that I'm happy to share, so that they could be created for different levels of learners. So there are there's a product that a group works towards. And this could be small groups within a class. It could be a whole class. Those all can be decisions that you get to make as a teacher to still maintain your personality and your own ideas about the facilitation of it. but it always results in a public hearing. And so everything that we're going to talk about is really simulated engagement opportunities, because that's where the skills and the confidence come, is from by presenting, getting feedback, presenting again. It's very iterative in the nature of learning, so it's reflective. Yes, and some students would advocate for more recess time and different activities, and that's all because the students can start to differentiate between what's government and what's not government. And that's one of the biggest takeaways of Project Citizen. So you'll see here, there's the first photo in that Project Citizen guide where students had just finished hearing. We're doing all of our portfolios virtually this year with a pretty cool software tool. It's free, called Miro. And they're recreating this board in a virtual environment. The first board identifies the problem that the students want to work on. The second part identifies all the different options, or many of the different options, that the students researched before coming up with a particular class policy. The third board is exactly that, the class policy itself. So how do you create consensus in a classroom where everyone has decided that this is the policy, for better or for worse, that a class is going to advocate for? And then the fourth panel is an action plan, which is what are the different steps that the class is going to take or asks of government to take to get closer to the reality of their particular goal. And so there's a lot of ways to have really the tactile engagement, the curiosity, the research, and it's exactly what some of you mentioned about really creating that desire to learn more on their own, because the students overwhelmingly start to pick some different issues that matter to them, and they now get to see the power of their voice and their advocacy. So we want to talk briefly. So that's Project Citizen. By far, one of the pieces that I personally really like about this is that it's really a way for students to get to know their community in real ways that they might not have otherwise. So an elementary example could deal with transportation to and from the school. And students will start to learn that not everybody gets dropped off at school by an adult, but some students, live in very different situations. It might take upwards of an hour to 2 hours to get to school. And what does that mean? There's different ways to understand different life experiences, because students are equipped and empowered to do interviews and research. And it's wonderful, wonderful to see the elementary school students, and I saw this with a first grade class just a couple weeks ago, do their interviews. They were talking about school safety, and so they were interviewing principals and teachers and custodians. The mayor, all would come and be interviewed by the students. And so it's also another way to get perspective and multiple perspectives. In Michigan, we do host a statewide showcase. We're bringing that back. It's been dormant for a little bit, but we're reinvesting in these resources so that we also have a statewide showcase. We also are here to help you coordinate your own school showcases. So if you want to take Project Citizen on, we will be right there helping to connect you to community so that you can have community involved as stakeholders in the process and also as part of the public hearing. What questions might you have about that? And again, this is all ages. It's a way to get at process skills.
So Ellen, Marilyn wants to know, how do you obtain Project Citizen?
You will have our emails and we'll be happy to connect with you that way. And also, if you do fill out that link, just make a note perhaps that you're really interested in Project Citizen, and we'll be happy to set up a meeting and we can do some calls about introducing you to Project Citizen in more detail.
Right.
So in our last couple minutes, we'll talk quickly to know this too, depending on what your particular goals are. there is increasingly some resources around mock trial, which helps some appreciation of the legal system that exists. Michigan is also hosting the national championship next year, to be the first time that Michigan's ever hosted it. And we've also expanded the program to include artistry and journalism. And we also open up our virtual courtrooms this year to American Sign Language interpreters who are looking for legal credentials. Okay, this one's really, really exciting. So we love Project Citizen and Project Community. We the People is a way to anchor project-based, problem-based, question-based, inquiry-based design in a classroom. And there are 4 levels of textbooks available, and they're available, again, we don't get money for textbooks. That's not what we don't care if you buy them or not. We'll be happy to give you resources too. There's a lower L, there's an upper L, middle school and high school geared textbooks. But let me say that, and I think Hillary could mention this too, is that when we were teaching at the high school level or middle school level, we would often use the books that were targeted for an age above or an age below in order to make sure that students who come in at different reading levels have some accessibility into the different materials. So this is kind of what the resources look like. They're a little bit more authentic than most civic textbooks are, and that they do try to deal with more of the real history and government as much as possible. So there is now the lower L version, upper L, middle, and high school. And it is all based on inquiry. This is also a simulated experience where students have a simulated congressional hearing where they go into Q&A about different issues dealing with the Constitution, their community, and all the complicated issues that fall within there. There are some beautiful, outdated, but still beautiful YouTube videos where you can watch students in action doing this. So in lower L, the focus is on 2 different units. What is a democracy? And how did the United States become a democracy? And those are accessible, you know, K3, K4. In terms of upper L, it starts to get a little bit deeper, and you see 5 different units of study. And there are a couple schools in Michigan that really do this well, and they have showcases every year within their own school. It's our hope as an organization to start to have those statewide showcases to highlight what the littlest ones are doing, what the upper L is doing, and then what middle school is doing. There is another level, and these are the 6 units in that next level, and then a high school version. And currently, we do have showcases. There are competitions available where schools will compete to be the state champion, We the People team in Michigan, and represent Team Michigan at national finals. That is never our goal or our focus. It just happens to be a nice side product for students who are authentically engaged in the process and want to have deep conversation with panels of judges. So we'll share this. If you, again, give us your link or information, we'll share this out. But there are some great YouTube clips. You can kind of just see for about 30 seconds. Again, this is really old. They're updating these this summer. So here, what makes that much more authentic is that students are engaging with questions in real time from a panel of judges. So that's great timing on that part. That's saying it's time and it's done to get out of this particular document real quick. So I'm going to stop sharing and open it up to any additional questions or ideas that you may have. We would love to help support you along this way. That's why we're here, and really want to take on, if a school district says we really want a civic identity, we will be right there to help you establish the pipeline and pathways so that students have meaningful civic education every step of the way. I would be happy to drop that
Sign up link,
again
yep.
here. Yep, it's right there. Oh, let's get that to everybody. So what we want to say, and what you already know, is that the youngest students are capable of really complex thought, and that providing programs, including Project Citizen, We the People, mock trial, or other related programs, it doesn't have to be those, are a way to honor. And we're here to help you as teachers guide your process in thinking about how might you set up your classroom to make sure you can be successful with a civic identity first. And with that, feel free to hang back for a couple minutes. We want to respect the time that you need to get to the next particular session. If you're curious about the high school specifically, you're welcome to hang here for a little bit. But otherwise, have a great evening. Please reach out to us. We're here to help. And I'm going to put my email once again in the chat just to make sure. Feel free to reach out.